Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Cimmerian September 2024, Day 1. This is a BookTube event created, of course, by Michael K. Vaughan, our foremost Conan fan, designed to celebrate Conan the Barbarian, the immortal character created by Robert E. Howard. Uh, Last year's Cimmerian September had as a loose organizing feature, of course, this is a Michael K. Vaughan event, so the organizing features are extremely loose. This is meant to be fun. This is meant to be enjoyed. Last year's organizing feature was to read the Robert E. Howard stories of Conan, all of them. He did like 17 of them when he was alive, and left drafts of some others after he shot himself. So there's a body of things that you can read, and they are collectible in one big fat volume, and it's possible to read them all in 1 month. The guiding principle this time around is Conan pastiche fiction. Right from the beginning, many people would argue too close to the beginning. Conan immediately started being written by other people as well. This is a character, one of those truly immortal characters like Sherlock Holmes, where many readers, once they encounter this world and this character, will just want more. They'll in fact want more than the author wrote, which sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't, because there is no because the copyright from the Tolkien estate is clamped down tight. There are, for instance, no J.R.R. Tolkien pastiches. Instead, they gave rise to an entire genre of epic fantasy that is basically pastiche in all but name, but not using the names or any of the explicit concepts. And the same thing, unfortunately, is true with Tarzan, who has plenty of pastiches in comic books, but is not allowed to have them in books. Same thing with John Carter of Mars, although John Carter of Mars, much as I love him, is not an immortal character. It's not given to many authors to create immortal characters, truly immortal characters, culturally immortal characters, so that you can go to a little kid in a non-English speaking country and they will know the character. It's some mimetic osmosis of some kind or another. Edgar Rice Burroughs created only one such character, Tarzan of the Apes, who doesn't have regular pastiche novels, which is a little bit on the odd side. And Robert E. Howard, despite what his ironclad fans will say, only created one of these characters, and that is Conan the Barbarian, who didn't have an ironclad copyright clamped down right from the beginning, and that caused problems. Because it meant that people could go at his work, which has appeared, most of it had appeared in Weird Tales, it appeared in pulp magazines. People could go at that massive body of ragged typescript pages that were found in boxes or in cupboards in his house, and think maybe something that was natural to think, which is that this isn't carved in stone. Plenty of editors had a hand at this stuff before we came along. An editor had to go over this stuff with a fine-tooth comb just for it to appear in Weird Tales. This is not, in other words, fixed literature. So we can muck around with it. However we like, we can muck around with it. And the people who did that, Elsbreg de Camp came along and did that with two aims in mind. He came along and tapped into this phenomenon 30 years after it had occurred, so in the 1960s, with two aims in mind. One was editorial in the strict sense of the word, which was to clean these things up. Are there typos? Are there grammatical errors? Are there syntactical errors? Are there errors that are obviously born of haste? Pulp writers tended to make these kinds of errors. And also, are there things that I need to clean up in a literal sense? Is there... The pulps were breeding grounds for incredible amounts of racism and sexism, and Robert E. Howard was not immune to that. And Elsbreg de Camp could come along later, 30 years later, and say, all right, well, I might want to tone down some of this, because this isn't fixed literature, and I want to spread the joy of it, so I want to tone down some of that, and maybe remove some of it altogether. Certainly where it looks like it's just a simple mistake, I can fix that. I can silently correct that. And the other thing that Elsbreg de Camp just had a yen to do was to impose a timeline on the adventures of Conan. it bothered him that there wasn't one. It bothered him that Robert E. Howard conceived of this character hacking and slashing his way through a prehistorical world, all the way from a baby on a battlefield to the throne of the greatest kingdom in that world. And Robert E. Howard, I think, liked the idea of, okay, well, I've got this tapestry of Conan, so let's plunk down right here. What is he doing now? He was a general. Okay, well, and what about my next story? What about what is he doing now? He's a teenage boy. He's just survived the siege of Cimmerian, and he's a teenage boy. Doesn't have much experience in the world. And maybe my next story will be somewhere else. Maybe I'll write a story of him as king, as the first story does. That seemed to bother Elsbreg de Camp in some way or another. Elsbreg de Camp and Lynn Carter went at these stories, and in addition to lightly bawdlerizing them, and we can talk about that, whether or not that's a good thing, they also ordered them into a chronological order, or at least grouped them chronologically, and brought them out as paperbacks. And that is where most people encountered Conan the Barbarian. Incredible fans might have encountered it before then. Latecomers have encountered it in slightly restored versions. A 3-volume paperback from Ballantine that was restored and illustrated. Those trade paperback editions are really something to own. The Coming of Conan, The Bloody Crown of Conan, The Sword of Conan. Those are volumes to have. They are originally illustrated, and they have an extensively explained, intelligent credo for how they were put together. That largely dismisses the work of Elsbreg de Camp, and the focus of Cimmerian September in 2024 is Conan pastiche fiction, and it looks to me like Michael K. Vaughan himself is going to reread all of those old Ace paperbacks and see what he makes of them. I think I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but I think, like most people, he encountered Conan for the first time there. Actually, in terms of print, I mean, most people in the world know Conan and encountered Conan through the movie, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, that had a seismically, tectonically greater effect in popularizing this character than anything else. But as movies tend to do. But I want to read a lot of Conan pastiche fiction for Cimmerian September. But I am interested in those old Ace paperbacks as well, with the great Frank Frazetta covers. A lot of them have great Frank Frazetta covers. So last night, to kick off Cimmerian September, I picked just one at random. I picked number 7 in the list, Conan the Warrior, which is Robert E. Howard, edited by Elsbreg de Camp, with this great Frank Frazetta cover. One run of these Ace paperbacks didn't bother to cover up the artwork at all. They just include it, just uncensored and uncluttered, which is great. Why? I wish this barcode, and for most of the time that we have mass market paperbacks that have barcodes, the barcode is on the inside, specifically so that it does not take up cover real estate. But I'll take it, definitely. But I thought, I'll read one of these things, but it turns out I did reread this whole book last night. There was no reason for me to at all. None at all. Because this is just 3 Robert E. Howard Weird Tales Conan stories. Red Nails, The Jewels of Gwalar, and Beyond the Black River. That's all that's in this book. It's there's a brief forward by Elsbreg de Camp, but otherwise it's just straight Robert E. Howard. But is it? I guess this is a light, very gentle introduction to me to Conan pastiche. This is not pastiche, but Elsbreg de Camp is definitely cleaning up these stories, and that makes me wonder, do we really dislike that? I know I said, these aren't fixed literature, that people thought Elsbreg de Camp, Lynn Carter, Glenn Lord, they're sifting through Robert E. Howard's papers, just stacks of papers, boxes of manuscripts and whatnot, returned stories with markings from the editor at Weird Tales. They're looking at all these things and they're thinking, well, this is definitely literature in flux. This is pulp stuff. None of us are taking pulp stuff seriously. We love it seriously, but we're not taking seriously as literature. We can change this anything we want. okay, and we might bridle at that, but what Elsbreg de Camp is doing in these three stories is taking out a lot of the overt racism and sexism. Is that a bad thing? I mean, I don't know that I'm going to read any other of these ace paperbacks for Cimmerian September, but rereading this last night, I was thinking, well, all right, this is what you want to do if you want to get the Conan stories to a broader audience free of most condemnation. I mean, there's still plenty to condemn in here, plenty to condemn. I'm pretty sure that Mike really likes Beyond the Black River, and so do I. The story Beyond the Black River is really good. It's really unusual. The narrative focus shifts to a character who isn't Conan for a long period of time, and that's good. And I'm not just saying that because Conan has a dog. Okay. But the undertones of it are pretty inescapably racist. And also the stories feature brainless nubile women who are just there either to be saved by Conan or to be saved and then raped by Conan, one or the other or both. But Red Nails famously has Valeria, one of the standout female characters that Robert E. Howard created as a foil for Conan, and as an effective one. Red Nails is mighty atmospheric. It's mighty good. Oh my, is mighty good. I don't know. Jules of Gwalar has its fans. I liked it a lot rereading it here. It takes no time at all to reread these things when you've read them as many times. I liked it, but it seemed there's a spark of real playful ingenuity in Red Nails, and there's a broader, brooding, or darker sense of almost semi-epic in Beyond the Black River. I see why fans love it. And those qualities don't seem to me to be present in Jules of Gwalar. So I read it and I enjoyed it. It has some really neat turns to it, but all of these stories are characterized by over-the-top description. They're all characterized by the hair's breadth, non-stop action that was so much a founding feature of the pulps. Oh, hi, baby. What you doing? You gonna go over to your chair? Huh? You gonna go over to your chair? Oh, you are. Oh, for Cimmerian September. Oh, no, baby. You're not gonna go over there? No, you're just gonna stick next to me? Oh, you're just gonna stick next to me. Okay. I can never tell. So I guess the long and the short of it is that my first foray into Cimmerian September for 2024 was fairly timid. I basically read Robert E. Howard. Basically being the key word here, and I don't know, if you're such a purist that you want these with the racism and sexism in them, I guess I could see that. But I haven't done a line-by-line comparison, but I really doubt that those new and definitive 3 trade paperbacks with the illustrations, I really doubt that they include the worst of this. I'll have to go back and look at their introductions and see what the editor says about that. I'm just curious. I guess what I'm curious to know is, what about you? There is still plenty of the raw original flavor of these stories in these ace paperbacks that Elsbreg de Camp is posthumously taking a lot of crap for mucking around with. What do you think of that? Would that spoil the story for you to encounter that just raw the way Howard wrote it in 1936? I'd be curious to know. I myself, rereading this, I have to admit, smiling in appreciation of the care and exactitude of Elsbreg de Camp's efforts. I don't know now more than ever. I don't know if it's really just to condemn him for creating these books, at least for doing what he does in this volume. What he does in some other volumes is condemnable, where he just changes things, not because they're offensive, not because they're insensitive, but just adds to them, expands them, and changes them because he feels like it, because he himself thinks there isn't enough there on the page. That's a lot more condemnable to me than what he does here. I know this will be controversial. It won't be the only controversial take that I have in Cimmerian September, but I honestly do believe that if Howard himself had lived to 1967, which he should have done if he hadn't blown his own brains out, he would have corrected these tales to look pretty much similar to this. I feel certain of that. He was a big-hearted, imaginative, empathetic guy. Like to play the tough guy, like to shadow box on the street, but he was big-hearted and kind and empathetic. There's no chance in the world that he would have lived through the social upheavals of the 50s and 60s and not been sympathetic to them. I don't think there's any... I think it's extremely likely that if we were looking at some book, it wouldn't be Conan the Warrior. It would have a name. But if we were looking at some book that he had made of these three stories, I think it would be very similar. I think he would have made a lot of the same changes. So I don't see how it's really... And if I'm right about that, then it's not just to condemn Elsbreg to camp. But I'm getting at it very along the very easy axis here, because these are mostly just Robert E. Howard. So Conan the Warrior is how I'm starting Cimmerian September. I think I will move on to straight up pastiche next time for tonight. But I don't know. I will see where we go. But I'm going to have a lot of fun this month. I hope you do too, especially those of you who love reading the Conan stories. It's going to be fun to revisit no matter what I do. I am one of those fans that just can't get enough of this character in this world. So I'll wrap this up for now, and we'll see what I encounter tonight. Thank you, BookTube.